Well, hello, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be joining us from. We are very gracious to be here and hold this time and able to share what we do in industry as a biotech that's been around for several years, creating great innovations in science and bringing medicine to the patients that we serve. And so here on this panel, you'll see people from various backgrounds who contribute to this work. And so I'm just going to jump in and get us started. We'll go around the room, kind of introduce ourselves and what we do at Amgen. So I'll start with myself. My name is Laura Harris, and I am the Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging lead for process development, as well as the project manager for operations. We do everything from culture, people, career development, ensuring that everyone has the same experience when you come into the company for the first time as a new hire, making sure you have that training and cultivating the environment where you have a sense of belonging. And with that, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Tanya Towns.
Hello, it's nice to meet everyone today. My name is Tanya Towns, and I represent worldwide operations. I'm within HR. I'm a senior manager there, and I lead the diversity, inclusion, business performance side. So I look from a global lens. I ensure that from attraction, that our brand, our worldwide operations is fully recognized. So those are actual staff that you see in any image that you see outside of the organization. We also want to ensure that the voices are heard. So we ensure that you have our leaders within the organization that go out into the communities. We support our community involvement, as well as our internal career development and the whole employee life cycle. And then that's measured in part of my accountability into our business performance when we do our business days within our operations leadership team. And that's where my focus is. Nice to meet you.
And with that, Tanya's going to pass it to you.
Yep, Jude. Thank you, Laura.
Great, thank you. It's a pleasure meeting everyone. Thank you, Nicole and HBCU 20 by 20 for organizing and for inviting us. And thank you also, Lara, for really helping us. My name is Jude Gang, and my role within Amgen is leading a team with Raquel, who is also here today, where our main role within the global medical organization is to ensure that the medicines that we are developing, we're including people that look like us in the process and ensuring that the medicines do also work for us. So we've been with Amgen 6 years, and it's been a very exciting time. Background is a pharmacist before coming on to Amgen, and I look forward to sharing more about what we do and the great work we are doing for the community today. So with that, I'll pass on to Osa.
Thanks, Jude, and thanks to everybody. I'm super excited to be here today. So my name is Osa Isley, and I'm the therapeutic, I represent the global patient safety function. And the global patient safety function here at Amgen serves patients by monitoring the safety of the products and medicines that we use, that we are studying here through what we call the science of pharmacovigilance. And pharmacovigilance refers really to all of the activities around monitoring, reviewing, evaluating, and communicating the information around the safety of the products. So I lead a team of physicians, nurses, PharmDs, and other folks of medical background who basically execute on the safety strategy for the product. And one way to think about it is when you get a medicine, a prescription drug, and you open the label and you look at the side effects, we ultimately, our team is ultimately responsible for ensuring that the information that is on those labels accurately represents the benefit risk profile of the product. And with that, I will pass it on to Raquel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Raquel Ricadio, Director of Global Representation and Clinical Research at Amgen. Jude introduced a bit about what our team does, really dedicated to improving the diversity and proportional representation of patients from historically excluded groups across Amgen's clinical research programs. So really what that means is that I work on embedding inclusive research principles across our clinical trial life cycle, make sure that we're being as innovative as we can to drive organizational change that's really critical to this work. And also do things like this, engaging with the broader R&D and healthcare communities and academic communities to really listen and learn and partner. I'm also on the senior leadership team of Amgen's Black Employee Network as part of that work. I've been with Amgen about 4 years, but I have close to 15 years of experience in clinical research. My background also includes public health research, which has really focused on racial, ethnic, and gender disparities in healthcare access and outcomes. So doing a job now that combines all of those, and happy to talk about that a little bit more as we have the discussion today. And I will pass it on to, I believe our last person on our call is Douglas.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here, and thanks to everyone. And I'm a proud graduate of an HBCU, the only one west of Mississippi, Charles Drew University School of Medicine. And as you may be hearing my voice, I have an accent as well, and I'm out of the Cockpit Hills of Jamaica, a beautiful island there. I am actually also support OSA. OSA is actually one of the TA safety heads, which of course, she oversees physicians like myself, and I'm also a public health professional. And specifically, I work dealing with benefit risks, as also pointed out about the pharmacovigilance. I am one of those persons who ensure that our benefits of our product outweigh our risks. And that's a phenomenal area to be in. And this is where we go up just above and beyond the normal labels that you would actually see when you read those medication that you get from your pharmacist or you buy over the counter. We actually also help to protect patients just above and beyond that space. So I'm looking forward to having discussion beyond this, and you'll hear a little bit more of what I do when we get further into this. So I'm very, very pleased to be a part of this. Thank you.
Excellent. So I want to just thank each of the panelists just for taking the time to introduce yourselves, give us a little bit more insight into the work that you all do day in and day out. So first and foremost, thank you, because I think that the work that each of you do really helps us move our community forward. So thank you for that. But if it's okay, I can dive into questions for the panel. So I think I'm going to start with my left. Dr. Osa, what led you to this role at Amgen?
Well, it was a long and meandering path, which, I'm sure all of us can relate to that after years working in the industry. But, prior to coming to Amgen, I was in New York, in New York, and I was working for a smaller pharmaceutical company. And I think actually when I think about what led to my role in Amgen, I need to take a step back and think about what led to my role as a physician in the industry. So I got my MD in Ukraine and my master's in public health here in San Diego. And I decided early on that rather than working as a clinician, I wanted to be do a public health, be of public health service. And what did that mean for me in terms of thinking about the combination of my backgrounds? And I got to know about the pharmaceutical industry in a forum when I was in college, and where we had some speakers share information, and that really opened my eyes to the opportunities. And I thought that patient safety really played a huge and tremendous role in terms of public health. And I diverted all of my energy towards identifying ways and means to find myself in the industry. And eventually this led me here to Amgen. Amgen is one of the, if not the largest biotechs in the world. And it's got an amazing portfolio of products. Amgen is driven by science. And so this has also kept me here for the last 8 years. And I think at this point, I'll maybe end at that because I could speak for a while.
No worries, no worries. We appreciate you just for sharing more about what brought you to Amgen and honestly what's keeping you there. Next, we'll go to Dr. Jude. Dr. Jude, how did you end up at Amgen?
Well, thank you. I think similar to us, I will try to really summarize a lifetime journey here, do my best. So I think The journey for me that led to pharmaceutical industry started actually, if I can start at that point, when I was actually a student pharmacist, where I did recognize in clinic my patients that I was following at the time, and ensuring that their therapy was working. I did notice a slight. I observed something that caught my attention, where some of my patients of African descent were not responding to hypertension medicines, similar to the other patients. And I was questioning, are you really taking the medicines? After a while developing that trust, I started looking deeper into the data or the information about those medicines. And then I realized an aha moment occurred when I realized that the clinical trials that informed those therapies do not adequately represent patients of African descent specifically. And that sort of really became personal, because then I was concerned for myself and then my family, my loved ones. So then I decided to pursue additional training with the focus of how to design and execute clinical trials, the next generation of clinical trials, to ensure that people like me are included in that process. So that's how I went on to the industry. And then fast forward a few years, I was initially at Novartis and then happened to come on to Amgen, and it's been a great and phenomenal time. As also said, I would pause here because Amgen we're doing some great work here, and I would allow others to maybe also share, and we can go into it further. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you for that as well. I'll ask Raquel the same thing. I know that you're currently a doctoral candidate, but what led you to this role at Amgen?
Sure. I think you're going to hear a common theme here, that our roles to Amgen or the past relates to Curatus, which actually I think has become a benefit for all of us on this call and where we are today. I actually have a journalism degree. That was my first degree in an undergrad, and worked in advertising for about 4 to 5 years before I went back to school and did a BS in biology, which is where I really started my research in health disparities, which focused on women in rural areas as well as women of color. Really got interested in that, and like Osa, finished my MPH as well. After that, I actually went to medical school for a couple of years, which is a whole other story. Did not complete my medical degree there because I think I needed to be a little bit more realistic about what I really wanted to do, which was to be really more, in the trenches, working more directly, doing some things that took some of my other experiences together. Then I started working for a company that actually did trademarking and naming for pharmaceutical and biotech companies, including Amgen. So if you've heard any of the names that are come out in the industry about pharmaceuticals and then things that the names that they have, I work for the company that does most of those. After that, was recruited by a startup that we worked with to become a CRA, then started working for a larger organization that worked under Amgen. So I was working with Amgen there, and then got recruited directly to Amgen to work for them, which really was a dream because of the way Amgen, runs its businesses, and it sees the potential in people like me that have a very mixed background, but can bring a lot to the table. So again, a really circuitous route, but one that I think I'm using all of those experiences in the role that I have today.
Thank you for sharing that as well. It sounds like Amgen was going to be inevitable through everywhere else you were. So sounds like it's home. So that's amazing. And then last, we'll ask Dr. Douglas the same question. What led you to Amgen?
It's by accident. Let me put it that way. Back in medical school, we've always been told that this is the evil side of the business and you should stay away from there. So I understood medicine only through the textbooks and what happened in the hospitals. But when I started out my journey, actually, as a young boy, I lived in a very rural community. And within that community, we did not have many hospitals. We had only one. And that single hospital, I had one of my best friends, Saurabh Das. His father was the only physician within the area. But my mother was a philanthropist, and she's a public health servant. And so the mingling of my friend being, his father being a physician, I got the opportunity to actually go to the practice and see what was going on. And with my mother being so involved in the community development and growth, that also spawned my interest in the space. Fast forward, I went to England, lived in a place where I worked at the Hammersmith Hospital and then worked in the bovine spongiform encephalopathy unit in London when the mad cow disease started its journey back in the 90s. And I was a little boy, nonetheless. And so I started understanding the importance of disease processes. And as a result, I also got involved in agriculture since it belonged under the Agriculture Ministries and Foods label, so to speak. And I started questioning what it is I wanted to do because I was surrounded by persons who were involved in the science space and also in education. And I felt that, you know, I wanted a complete and rounded education. And I felt that medicine was the space. So I went into medicine, got to medical school, and I, you know, started my training and started realizing that the medical space is quite huge. And I started learning more about the pharmaceutical space. We have these pharmacists who would come in, present medication, talk about them, mechanisms of action. And it hits home that really and truly, it's not as evil as it was told, but it's truly complementary. And having done that, I started experiencing some challenges in the medical space here because evidently being a diverse person in a state, I was all the way in Ohio when I went through some of my training, and some challenges were awry. And just like Jude mentioned that he started wondering, I started noticing the differences, how some patients were treated, you know, persons of, you know, certain hue, you know, within the certain diverse space. Persons who were disenfranchised, and I wanted to understand why is it they were not getting the same level of care. But to do this, I felt that it was important for me to also be a part of the public health space. Hence, having done some training, done some work in the medical space, I decided to go to the public health institution. Went to Charles University, and there I started learning a whole lot more about diversity and inclusion, and start learning about the urban health space, and start understanding just beyond what ordinary medicine see. And so while there, I went into the CDC. From the CDC, somehow someone from Amgen saw a resume that I had online for several years and called me. And I was very, very shocked because I've always heard about Amgen, especially Prolia. You see this advertisement online and on TV, and you know, see how you can, you know, so for that very reason, I took an interest in the area. I didn't know much about it. I just went into it. Got into Amgen, and 11 persons interviewed me, and out of the 11 persons, only one person had my color, and guess who it was? Osa. Osa is the only person left at Amgen who interviewed me, and she was really that type of person. When she asked me the most challenging questions and made me really think about this space. And to this day, maybe she doesn't even know that I still look up to everything she says and what she does constantly, because to have our hue, you have to be of a certain excellence. And what that excellence means that you have to do your best, and you have to treat the area that you're in with integrity. And that's exactly how I got into Amgen and why I'm still at Amgen, because I see people, and including other persons like Jude, I see him just treading the path of greatness. And I see how those persons are making great contributions. Raquel, the same with Lara. I see many other persons are really making an effort and a contribution to this space. And here I am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Douglas, just for providing that overview. Also, we can see kind of like a global development, like even in your own personal and professional journeys. So thank you just for sharing that, and thank you to each of the panelists for introducing yourselves. I want to be a little bit more targeted in some of my questions. So I think I want to start with Dr. Jude. How is Amgen creating equity in the healthcare system?
Wow, I think, Nicole, maybe before I even respond, I feel like clapping for Dr. Roberts. I was hearing some things about you as well. We've interacted a lot and listening. Thank you for organizing this. I'm learning more about my colleague and friend, Doug. So I think maybe what we're doing specifically from a health equity, if I may start, maybe then Raquel can also join, because Raquel is also really doing phenomenal work as well. But I can be very concise by mentioning two aspects, which we touched on briefly to ensure that from a health equity lens, we are developing drugs with the end date, sort of that that focus on the historically underrepresented or also the unmet needs in the underrepresented populations where some of us are from as well. So really we talk a little bit about that, and Raquel can expand further, but also talking about what are the additional activities we're doing to ensure that our efforts are sustainable and would continue for the rest of the drug development activities for the rest of the industry as well. So we talked briefly about our role here to support the development of drugs inclusively. So what Amgen is really doing that we're really proud of is the commitment, the true commitment and belief that if we do not include all these populations, we are developing incomplete science. We're not doing scientific process, and then also from a moral standpoint, we're not being moral because our mission is truly to serve patients and all patients. So Amgen, really proud to say Amgen really takes that seriously. Our leaders really take that seriously and are investing not just words, but investing tangibly into these activities. And I think what I can summarize here from that perspective is related to the commitments that they gave us and the sponsorship to work with every clinical trial team, every, I could say, medicine team, to make sure that we sit with them and we review and work with them, take them into the trenches with us if needed, and then incorporate all the realities and perspectives of all patients into the design, and also put measures in the clinical trials that would ensure that the historically underrepresented patients would have a possibility to participate if they are willing to participate in the trial. And then maybe from going beyond drug development is in the aspect of generating or developing the next generation of sort of staff like ourselves or leaders in this space. We're also investing significantly in organizations or institutions like even the HBCUs as well, and multiple other institutions to develop programs, internship programs, fellowship programs. I think also mentioned here the team that she leads. Also across the board, the research and development organizations and other organizations like operations that Tanya and Lara, with really ensuring that we are creating spaces or infrastructure internally to bring in diverse talent. When I take a look back and looking at when I first got into the industry, where we are today, I literally have goosebumps in terms of the efforts that Amgen is doing in this space. So, but with that, maybe I can pause and maybe pass on to Raquel to sort of add some more points.
Yeah, sure, Jude. I think we talk quite a bit because Jude and I obviously are focused on clinical trials. A part of what Amgen is doing with health equity is really focused on that, which we call representative product development, to make sure that we're expanding access to and participation in clinical trials. In addition to that, we're also very focused on comprehensive health education, which Jude already touched on, that really is working on improving health literacy and education among underserved communities, and then also an accessible and inclusive healthcare. And that's really focusing on strengthening community and care support systems, as well as access to medicines for underserved patients. So those sort of three pillars that we look at within health equity are access, awareness, and policy. And some of the examples of things that we have done already, right? We're really involved with collaborating with nonprofits and communities that help remove barriers to participation in clinical trials, including the American Heart Association, the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, as well as the Lazarus Cancer Foundation. If you don't know that organization yet, I really encourage you to look at that. We've been a sponsor of their impact program for several years, really contributing $2 million plus to that program that's focused on improving patient enrollment, retention, and minority participation in oncology trials. We're also involved with the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. The CEO Roundtable is going for Gold Initiative, which is a partnership with HBCUs and Hispanic serving institutions that focus on active cancer care, and as well as the creation of our HBCU BioTech Fellowship Program, which is a professional development program that will prepare and empower about 50 students and soon to be graduates from historically black colleges and universities for careers at Amgen. We could really honestly go on and on about what we're doing, but we wanted to give you some examples for that. I'm happy to share more of those with you after the call or during our Q&A to talk more about some of our partnerships within the community as well.
Thank you both so much for just providing that insight. I think that at many of our HBCUs, we're taught about history. So we think about people like Dr. Marion Sims, who kind of like tested, or didn't kind of, but did test on Black enslaved women. And, you know, I think that there's been kind of like a hesitancy to work with pharmaceutical companies, to work with healthcare systems. So it's, I think that for me, it means a lot to know that we have people like Raquel and Dr. Jude who are committed to making sure that we're not only represented and seen within clinical trials, but feel like, you know, that we can be safe participating in those trials. So thank you for providing that context. My next question is for Dr. Osa and also Dr. Douglas as well. How does patient safety support Amgen's mission to serve patients? And what role do patients play in bringing medicines, or what role does Amgen play in bringing medicines to underrepresented communities?
All right, thanks, Nicole. I'll get started and then I'll let Douglas chime in. So, you know, Amgen's mission is to serve patients, and within the Global Patient Safety Organization, patient safety is our highest priority. So for, you know, as I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, for a product to be approved, we have to demonstrate that the benefit risk profile of the product is positive, which means that the benefits outweigh any perceived risk of the product. So our job starts really from first in human trials, which is the phase 1. Once a product has gone through preclinical testing, and from then on until a product gets to the market, we're constantly working in terms of collecting this information, evaluating the safety, informing the patients about communicating the risk messages, and implementing strategies that can really minimize this risk. And sometimes it can be something as simple as, you know, have a soda before you take your pill, right? And understanding how the drug works and understanding how it affects us and how we affect the drug in essence allows us to make those types of decisions and really ensure the best experience that we can for these patients. Doug, do you want to add a little bit more on the mission?
Certainly. And while you were actually speaking there, I wanted to sort of make it a little bit more practical to how we also ensure that our medication, our benefit really outweighs risk, and how we actually implement that in the market space, and also for the underrepresentation and the racial and ethnic populations, and how this works from our perspective. So we engage also with third-party vendors, and we ensure within that we also do effectiveness evaluations of these medications and the tools that we're creating, the physician booklets and the brochures and so forth, the patient wallet cards, because these are important information for all persons to understand, even covering whatever the diversity, whatever the population is. But importantly, we require that most of these organizations with whom we work, they follow a certain standard that Amgen actually implore. We want to ensure that we have persons who are underserved to be a part of these surveys. We want to ensure persons who are underserved are part of these effectiveness evaluations, because we want their voices to be heard. We want their languages to be a part of how we create our questions, how we make the medicine more accessible, how we actually take care of that diverse group of persons, because we need to understand their risks associated with this as well. If you think of the clinical space, what happens is persons go into these medical trials, and within the clinical trials, and I think that's where Jude and Raquel comes in as well, want to ensure that those patients who participate in these medication in the clinical trials are represented among all the subpopulations. And when they're represented within the subpopulations, we can have a better way in how we can deal with all subset of these persons. You may also recall, with the Tuskegee experiment. Nicole mentioned something with regards to a medical apartheid. And those of you who have not read that book, you probably would like to read that book to see how the pharmaceutical space was affected. But now you have persons such as myself, Osa, Jude, Laura, Raquel, who are within this space. And we are implementing, considering from my background from the HBCU background, and we're trying to implement these concepts so that our medicines and whatever we do and whomever we reach, we're also reaching that racial population that needs to be also involved. So our medication that they're taking the benefits will always outweigh the risks, as Osa has mentioned.
Thank you so much just for providing insight into that as well. And Dr. Douglas, I know that you mentioned attending an HBCU, specifically
Yes.
Charles Drew in my hometown of Los Angeles, specifically South Central. But anyways, I'd love to learn just a little bit more about how your HBCU experience has prepared you for the work that you're doing today to ensure that patients know that they're safe and that Amgen's products are products that are good to use.
You're very, very right. South Central down there, you've mentioned before, so I realized that yeah. And that's a great institution, I must tell you. Dr. Carlisle is doing a fantastic job down there. Persons such as Dr. Cynthia Davis, with whom, she taught me, dealing with the underserved population, understanding how to integrate ourselves within that population, how we really need to reach out to persons who are truly not having the right access, how to understand this. So now, how do I bring this forward? Now, first and foremost, being from a different space and different place, I did not understand the United States of America. Let me put it this way. I did not understand the challenges that were being faced here. I did not recognize that so many persons were truly, truly disenfranchised. I'm from a country that's a third, considered third, whatever they call it, right? Third world nations. And so when you're looking at the great America, you're not expecting America to have the disparities that exist. And this was brought home to me having gone to Charles Drew University. But most importantly, when I got to Amgen here, the first thing my previous manager said to me was that we are dealing with benefit risk assessment. And this, they're following a precede proceed model. And those of you who have done public health would understand what the precede proceed model really is. And had it not been for Charles Drew, had it not been for HBCU, I would not have understood what that meant. And that comprehensive structure just to assess the health needs and assessing health needs within communities. Not only was I exposed to understanding that, I was exposed to implementing these methodologies. And I've also, within that time, I've worked with my managers to really see how best we could implement and add some of these and sprinkle the HBC experience within this space as well. One of the most important things was when I actually did, through Charles Drew University, an internship. And this internship was with Susan G. Komen. So I dealt with breast cancer. I actually firsthand saw the data set with regards to what's affecting our African-American women and breast cancer, and also Hispanic women. Pretty much that group of persons. I was a part of the communities. I was entrenched in the communities. I did the service in the communities. And so it is because of that institution. And so because of that, I tend to apply those learned principles within what I do today. Currently, I'm here 3 years and 6 months, and on my team, I am the senior member now. All the other persons have left. And with every morsel of my being, I try to implement the concept of inclusion, the concept of understanding what the disenfranchised is, competency. It is so important, not only in what we are doing for benefit risk, but in terms of reaching out to other patients, in terms of dealing with our market research, in terms of dealing with our risk management documents, in terms of when a patient pick up that pamphlet and start reading it, as Raquel mentioned at one point about health literacy. the importance of understanding the important information, because health literacy is so crucial. And that's something that I'm absolutely implementing within. And because of the HBCU, I'm able to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Douglas, just for sharing that. I think that HBCUs really do have a great handle on ensuring students know that there are so many resources out there, getting them connected, understanding what they really need to know. I think it was mentioned a little bit earlier that sometimes there's this notion that we have to work twice as hard or just be excellent. And I think that that's something that HBCUs push. So we're really excited about that. Just kind of seeing that kind of like unravel with our HBCU BioTech fellowship with Amgen. So thank you so much for that. Next, I'd like to ask Laura and Tanya a little bit more about the ways Amgen is pushing the needle on diversity and inclusion. I know that through creating products and through clinical trials, there's a lot of work being done to ensure the Black community and other diverse and underrepresented communities feel seen, heard, and supported. But I'd love to know from an operational standpoint, a little bit more about how you feel Amgen is kind of shifting.
So thank you very much. Amgen is really shifting into more of a business performance, and we're grounded in when we look at diversity, inclusion, and belonging. We're really under our environmental, social, and governance. So we're really looking at healthy people, which we've talked about, right? Healthy planet, healthy society, right? And a healthy Amgen. And in that scope, it's not just one group that's focusing on that. It's spread and measured from a board level, it's put into our commitment, as well as our leadership performance. And we're looking at sustainment, right? We're not just looking at a one-time metrics. We're looking at how do we ingrain this through our business and who we are. We do all align on advancing science, helping patients, and serving our community. And these dual passions are really ingrained in our culture. And that culture is where we're being held accountable to, right? So when we look at leaderships, are we doing compassion-centered leaderships? And how are we measuring that? When we're reaching out for a consultant, we have our advisors, which I can't wait. And hopefully I'm going to plant the seed, and Jude or a few other, Raquel are going to speak to this about our employee resource groups, right? We had mentioned our Black employee resource groups, but we have 12, and they actually drive business initiatives, right? They bring those to our leaderships. We ask for our vice presidents to sponsor them. We have global chapter leads. We represent our, the broader communities, and it's not a singular statement. Even though we are a North American company, we're a global company, and we need to have that lens. And then we measure that. I think this is the key part. So when we're talking about business performance, how do we get those results, right? So if we're delivering, how do we get them? And are the results showing us the trends that we want to see in the future? And if not, what mitigating tactics are we putting in place for all dimensions of diversity? We're looking at accessibility, not just when I hear the conversation of race and gender. That's a big part, but are you seeing me authentically from where I came from, right? From the different countries I come from accents, access to develop access to our medicines. We look at that holistically, and that's the approach. And I'll say that that's not just me, but when you speak to different individuals, we all ground foundationally at Amgen, I will say, on advancing the science and people in the community. We all have a passion for people, right? So, and then we bring that science in, right? And that's where we ground on. Laura, did you have anything to add?
I just think that it's important to mention that, you know, the conversation about diversity, equity, belonging, inclusion, you know, is something that everybody holds themselves accountable for. And I think that is why it's working at our company. I think it's the accountability piece, making it your personal mission, absorbing those mission and values, and representing the company in that way, and building a culture and community where everyone thrives and everyone wins, and that, you know, everyone feels like they're able to be their authentic self is where we're seeing success. And then we have programs, right? We have our Amgen Foundation, right? We have the Amgen BioTech experience. We have the lab exchange, all of these things that we're putting not only, our efforts internally, but externally, right? To make the world a better place, society a better place. And I think that's where we all find, that warm spot in our hearts that our company is doing these things and they're listening to our voice. That's
Thank
it.
you. I would say thank you both so much for providing that insight. I think that even internally, I think that when in today's world, when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we tend to talk about it from like an outsider lens. But it's great to hear, like, even internally, the kinds of shifts that are happening, just to create that more inclusive environment or culture at Amgen. So thank you all just for sharing that and the work that you all do too. My next question is a little open-ended, and it's for anyone who feels comfortable answering. But it's where do you see the future of this industry going? What's the future of biotech?
I'll start with this one, Nicole, just because I've been thinking about this question. I think I've gotten it in other panels here, right? We're talking about future. We talk a lot about technology and innovation, right? We're a biotech company at Amgen as well. So a lot of what we focus on is in technology and innovation, and that's going to continue. That's not going away. A lot of what we're doing is from a digital focus, telemedicine, how can we bring trials more easily to more people? And a lot of that will come from technology and innovation. But at the same time, when it comes to research specifically, especially for communities who have been historically excluded, I think we're also going to be becoming more analog as well. Engagement with people where they live and work is a personal thing. It's not necessarily something that has to happen via, a smartwatch or anything like that. So there's going to be sort of these two things. Technology and innovation will continue, but there'll also be this analog portion that's coming back, where we're building real long-term, sustainable, trusted relationships. That happens in an analog scale, right? You're really talking to people in the way that they would like to be heard and the way that they would like to speak, really making sure that those relationships are true and genuine. And that is also an innovation when it comes to research now, because we've been so focused on technology and how can we use that. This other part will come into play when it comes to research in the future of the industry, where we're reconnecting with people, because really patients and participants in clinical trials, they're people at the heart of that. And it's something that, we need to remember and make sure that that's top of mind. And I really think that that's where the industry is going, is it's going to sort of do those simultaneously, being innovative and full of technology, but also understanding that the analog portion of the community relationship is going to be key to how we approach research at all.
Yeah. Maybe I can just add to what Raquel has said, right? As I think about what the future of this industry is, we live in an age of wealth of data. I mean, there's just so incredible amount of data. It's overwhelming. I mean, the other day I heard a statistic that said that it would take, we've got like plane loads of data, and we were trying to figure out how to get it from one country to another. Like, it was something crazy like that. But what this means for us, and from a drug development standpoint, is that, traditionally it takes over 10 years, right, to be able to get a drug from bench to basically the market, which is an incredibly long time when you think about diseases, especially diseases like cancer, where patients oftentimes at the time, they might have months, right? So they don't have the luxury of waiting 10 years for us to develop a drug. So we are looking at basically using this data, harnessing the power of the data to be able to get drugs to people in a much shorter time frame. And I think one great example within Amgen is our recent product, drug that got approved in non-small cell lung cancer, called Lumakras. And that drug basically within I want to say it's 3 years, went from basically preclinical to getting it into patients, right? Which is absolutely incredible. It's amazing. It's a testament to the people at Amgen. It's a testament to our ability to take this data and really make it work for us. And I think this is where we're going to see many more drugs being able to get to the right patients in much shorter times. And I think that, from a public health standpoint, is just that is phenomenal. I mean, when we think about the aging population, when we think about these diseases that up until now we don't have a cure for them, I think this is really going to open the doors. In particular, in areas like oncology, we've seen a dramatic shift and change in how diseases are being treated in that area.
I want to complement what Osa just said also with and Raquel in a combination of thinking of where this platform will also lead. There's a great book, which some of you may have heard of. It's actually written by Lee and Chen. It's called Artificial Intelligence 2041. And this book actually takes us on an immersive trip through the future of pharma bio. And it speaks of the data that Osa just mentioned about that plane, taking it from one country to the next, and how artificial intelligence is going to work and actually make this happen. It's a form of disruptive technology. Many of you may have heard of the blockchain that is so taking over the NFTs that persons have heard of, the Bitcoins and all of these things on that platform. So you may have also heard of CRISPR. It's like rapid human genome sequencing through artificial intelligence, the same set of concept. That's how that CRISPR is actually, it's a breakthrough technology for gene editing. Amgen is getting there. We are going to be there. In fact, there's a statement that was made maybe a few months ago in one of our meetings, where by 2027, Amgen will be fully digitized. And that is the space where the future of pharmaceutical is. It means that we are on the cutting edge of the process. We're on the cutting edge of thinking of the future. You will belong to the future. When you think of the internet itself, the internet is really limited in space, but the blockchain technology, you can build the things, you can see what's happening when later on, if Amgen were to adopt these principles, see what's happening in every process of the way. Also mentioned with regards to how it takes a long time, up to 10 years to develop a drug. But we've recently seen what happened with COVID. We've also seen recently what happened with our own Lumakras, as she mentioned. So it tells you that Amgen is right on the path of the cups of the development. It's going to be an exciting time. There was a symposium that was in Canada in 2022, and on the symposium 2021, it was on innovate or die, and that's what's going to happen in the space. Raquel mentioned analog. Analog is coming back, in fact, because it's easier, it's accessible, but at the same time, it's a combination. They're combining these tool sets so that we can have a brighter, better future when it comes onto the medicine that will be accessible not only to those who have, but those who don't. And that is where the future is going to be. It's going to be an amalgamation of all of us coming together and creating that oneness. Future is great.
Thank you just so much again for providing that insight. And also I shared in the comments the AI 2041 10 visions for our future, just in case anyone wanted to check that book out. So thank you for that resource. I know that we're coming close to time and we have a few questions. I see we have 4 questions. So if you have any additional questions, viewers, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, I'll be paying attention to see what comes in. But we'll start with our first question from Hannah. We'll have Tanya answer this one. But how can recruiters help best with this initiative as well, understanding there is a big part played by who is sent to a biotech to hire?
I agree. So really to start addressing that, actually, as of 2020, we started training all of our recruiters about our business. For any hiring manager that opens a rec, a recruiter, we ask them to actually engage an hour with that hiring manager. And then we go to events. We actually reach out to our employee resource groups. We reach out to different champions within the organization so that they're represented. So you will not just see a recruiter at a university or at a conference or association event. You will actually see somebody from the business that can speak to the business and their personal experience. And then we do continual training about the business, but also key about, cognitive empathy, understanding the culture of our organization, because a lot of recruiters are third-party vendors, right? So we want to ensure that whoever you're representing with understand our business, the life of Amgen, but core and purpose, we have a business person there, right? So that we're mindful that you're getting that experience and you have a true representation of what Amgen is.
Thank you so much for answering that question. Our next question says, any ongoing efforts to bring decentralized trials access to communities that have been historically underrepresented? So do you all have any efforts? I guess we kind of talked about that a little bit, but just to bring trials to the communities. So I think that might be a Raquel and Dr. Jude question in regards to how you all are bringing trials to the communities.
I think maybe Raquel, I may start with that. I think it's first to recognize that I think there's a question as well. We have to recognize the historical issue of trust, which Douglas mentioned as we talk about clinical trials. And to just say we're treading very, very carefully, intentionally, and ensuring that we're working with the community and meeting the community where they are. First, I think the initial approach that we're doing now, which is different from the past, is actually trying to build that gap or build trust back and then maintain the trust. So what we're starting now initially is having community engagement, which Raquel mentioned, but having engagement with the community without an agenda, without even independent, we call it agnostic to a clinical trial. So how do we first have these interactions, moving away from the historical transactional approach to more of a relationship, long-term relationship approach, and then keep it bi-directional as well for dialogue. And then borrowing Raquel's favorite phrase here, coming from a place of humility and then holding ourselves at that humble position by listening with intent and listening again, and then co-creating activities with the communities and ensuring that we are really truly meeting the communities where they are and not, again, repeating, coming with an agenda. So with that, we taking these careful steps to ensure that we are already there with the community. The community knows us and trusts us. And even when it comes to a clinical trial, the community would actually let us know. You talk to us about clinical trial. We're not going to be imposing that as well. So Raquel and I and our team are really here to ensure that we try to solve this problem now once and for all, and to try to really bridge that gap and maintain it. But from a decentralized clinical trial perspective, when we're having these relationships with the community, we're having the leaders who represent the community, and we're in connection with them. And then also there's a key gap right now between the community and the healthcare institutions. How do we strengthen that relationship as well to ensure that there's that flow of both dialogue and also activity? So with that, then that enables us to even using that term decentralized clinical trials, which we try not to use, because what does that mean from a member in the community? But we're trying to say, okay, if we're going to bring the trials, how are we going to bring it, and also collaborate with the community as we are designing the clinical trial. So, and Raquel, this is where Raquel is really an expert on, where ensuring that the community is part of that journey with us, or representative from the community, the patients, the caregivers. So individuals that touch a patient's sort of ecosystem from when they step out of the door and even when they're at home in the dinner table, because these perspectives do matter for us and it gives that reality to us. And then we put those measures in place now. To summarize with the clinical trial decentralization, which is the term we use here in industry, is working with partners that would work within that strengthening gap between the patient and the community and also the healthcare institution. What do we put in place now to ensure that the patient does not undergo any undue burden? We do not bring additional stressors to their lifestyle, and also not even additional stressors to the local healthcare institution. But again, you can certainly tell this is our passion, and I can pause there and maybe Raquel can close with a couple of summaries.
I think you've got it, Jude, and I want to make sure that we have the time here. Nicole, do you have, I think you probably have another question, but definitely covered it from decentralized. That's a big catch-all. So the way that we're approaching it is that decentralizing is taking the clinic as close to, sorry, the trials as close as we can to the patients, which can include technology. It can also be as simple as making sure we're working with community cancer clinics for a really good example.
So, Nicole, I see that we have quite a few questions.
Yeah,
So
I was just curious.
what I think we can do, because I do want these individuals to get a response, is we can send you a response which you can share, because we have to let our panelists go to the rest of their days. But just a phenomenal session. Thank you to each and every one of you, the splices that you shared on your personal journey, what you do in industry, what you do for Amgen, your personal take on the roles you play is just, been overwhelming for me. These are, to Jude's point, these are things that I probably never would have learned intimately outside of this panel. So thank you all for sharing your richness with us. And thank you to everyone who's joined, and we will get Nicole those responses to those questions. Yeah, I feel like someone's asking about contact. Yes, please find us. I believe this is shared. Please find us on LinkedIn. Happy to connect and continue the conversation. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all for participating, and have a wonderful rest of your weekend. I got all the questions, so we'll make sure to get the answers to everyone.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So, thank each of you.
Bye.
Bye. More questions?